Hello and welcome to the BRR Legal Brief, where we bring you the latest legal issues affecting corporate Australia. I'm Kate Ritchie. The government recently released exposure draft legislation proposing amendments to the anti-avoidance tax provisions, with amendments to affect transactions entered into on or after 16 of November 2012. And joining me to discuss the changes is Jock McCormack, who heads up the tax practice at DLA Piper Australia. Jock, thanks for coming into the studio.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Kate. Look, before getting into the major changes, it's important to note that there's still a consultation period to be gone through. Although we don't expect significant changes, the government's quite committed to this reform, but it's important to bear that in mind. The key changes are really threefold. Yep. Firstly, we have a broad objects clause that's been included in the revised legislation, which makes it clear that it's an independently ascertained objective intention test. Secondly, the process and the manner in which we go about identifying and quantifying the tax benefit or advantage that would be secured is quite clearly spelled out. But thirdly, and most importantly, there's a big change to the assumptions upon which you pursue the alternative postulates that have to be considered, which is the alternative way of implementing a transaction. And so that's the area that's going to create most controversy and challenge. Well,
what's prompted the government to introduce the changes?
Well, very simply, it's perceived deficiencies in the tax law, and with that, the tax office has lost several large commercial transaction cases in the last couple of years, and with that, the consequent revenue loss, which is hundreds of millions of dollars. So clearly, that has driven the reform, and the government has made it clear that the whole intention is to restore the integrity of Part 4A, which is really a pivotal section to the whole Tax Act.
Well, Jock, you mentioned that we're still in consultation period at the moment. How do you think industry is likely to respond to the proposed changes?
Sure. Look, business will be very cautious. They will, see it as creating additional uncertainty and perhaps treat it with a bit of trepidation. But subject to the consultation process that I've seen announced, referred to, business will need to get on with it. They'll need to assess how this might impact on future transactions, but we should have clarity as to the direction over the next couple of months.
Well, at this current point, what do you see as the main implications for business?
Look, the main implications are really that, given the major Part 4A cases in the last few years around transactions like sale of business assets, major restructures, all of those sorts of transactions need to be very closely analysed because they're very much in the radar of the ATO and related resources. So those sorts of transactions will need to be properly considered. What is quite clear from the proposed amendments is that now the purpose test and the objects test and the related benefits test, tax benefits test, now have really been rolled into one, and they need to be considered in a single holistic sort of manner.
Well, just finally, we're still waiting for the legislation to be enacted, but it is to affect transactions entered into from 16 of November this year. What should businesses be considering now when looking at commercial transactions?
Look, that's a very good point. The key is that there is a sensible dividing line between legitimate commercial planning and tax avoidance. And one of the key things that taxpayers must do, and it's not new news, but they need to document and all communications, all information about the process by which they go through in identifying, one, the transaction that they propose to enter into, but how they consider other alternatives, the pros and cons, why they went one way, why they went, didn't choose a particular transaction. That is critical. So documentation and communications is critical. But lastly and most importantly, they need good tax advice.
Well, I think that's some good advice there. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jock.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And viewers, thank you also for joining us. We hope that you can join us next week for our legal brief.